So now let's talk about the AJAX support and the new code generation features. So I'm going to run WebORB for Java right here. And once it starts, I'm going to bring up a management console. All right, so this is the management console now pointing to WebORB for Java running on my computer. Let me show you what we have done with JavaScript. So let me go into the service browser and just bring up some of the classes that I have deployed. And let's start with something very, very basic, and it's basic service. So right here there's one method called calculate with 3 arguments, and let's just invoke that method right here, and we get the result. Now if I click on actual class name and switch to AJAX client, okay, let me download this code. All right, so this is the code that it downloads. Now, what we have done in version 4.1 is we're adding support for not just for the code generation that will give you the basic plumbing, but we also include a sample application that will give you an idea how to use the generated code and what you can, the various things that you can do with it. So this basic service invoker.html was just generated by WebORB code generator, and if I run this thing, it just starts the sample application. Now notice that it includes a list of the methods that this specific service, and then see what generated for class WebORB.examples, the basic service. And there is a method calculate, and right here I can just type in the arguments. Now, and notice that as I type the arguments, this part of the code, this part of the page is a JavaScript code that you can just select and copy and paste into your application that demonstrates how to do invocation of that specific method directly from JavaScript. And the arguments that are typed in right here are going to be the arguments that are in this generated code. So if I click invoke, we get the result right away. There is also invocation history, so you can see the times that it takes by playing with different arguments. You can clear the section and repeat the invocations and so on. And notice that as the values change, the code is automatically updated. Now this form right here is very, very versatile. So if you do have complex types, it will support that. If you do have arrays, or if you were to have like generics on the server side, it will generate all the code in the forms to support that as well. Now the beauty of this particular generator is that for any complex types that you use on the server side, whether it is EJB or Spring or Pojo, for all those complex types on the Java side, a corresponding JavaScript code and JavaScript class, quote-unquote class, will also be generated. And not only that, but all the class mappings between JavaScript types and corresponding Java types will be put in place. So this way, you can just start kind of thinking in terms of objects from the client-server integration perspective. Okay, let me show you something a little bit more advanced. And for that, I'm going to use, let's say, data binding service. And there is a method get customers. If I invoke it, I do get a list of all the customer records from a local database that I have there. So let me generate code for this. Let's go to the AJAX client, download code. And notice that not a single line of code is written. I just download this code, I open it in a browser, and I do have this JavaScript application. So here it is, all the methods from this particular class. And if we do get customers, there is no argument. There are no arguments, and here it is. We got the result, and it is an array, and we can just expand and collapse this array, and then see individual elements of the response. So here's one record. Okay. Now notice, as far as the actual code that this application generates, it gives you an idea of how easy it is to use WebORB AJAX API. So first of all, there is a class called data binding, and this class is going to be a JavaScript class that is created after the server-side corresponding class. So you create the service, and then this service will automatically have all the same methods that the corresponding server-side service has. Okay, so if we created this proxy in JavaScript, then we can just say service.getCustomers, and that will give us the result. Okay, now these methods can be invoked either synchronously or asynchronously, but for the simplicity's sake, we just show how easy it is to use this synchronous invocation pattern. Okay, let me check if there are any questions about this AJAX stuff. All right, there's nothing about AJAX, but there's a question on if we will be adding support for other Flex frameworks such as robot legs. That's definitely on our radar. We just haven't had time to sit down and look into it, but this is not the first time I hear a request like this about robot legs, so more than likely it's definitely going to be included in one of the versions as well. Now, on this particular subject, as far as adding code generators, the framework for adding code generators is wide open. It really is a matter of creating an XSLT and plugging it into WebORB. So if you were to create a code generator, and there's really nothing that would be on the way as far as WebORB infrastructure that would not allow you to do this. So it's something that I highly encourage you guys to play with it. And if you want to, if you develop something as far as code generator for WebORB, you're welcome to send it to us, and we will do a proper credit for the contributor, and be happy to include your code into the product distribution. Okay, there's a question on what technology WebORB uses for pushing to AJAX clients. Okay, we're not quite there yet, but with a look ahead for this, for the data push, we use WebSockets by default if the browser supports WebSockets. If WebSockets are not supported, then the client will do polling, either short polling or long polling, depending how you configure it, to retrieve messages from the server. Okay, there is a question of whether we have async AJAX examples. It's actually right in the user guide, and as far as the async, it's fairly trivial. There is a special class called async that you can create and pass in a pointer to a function, which will be called by WebORB client-side infrastructure when the result is available. And it has, if you were to use that async object, it needs to be the last argument of the method. We will probably enhance this app a little bit, where the options to say, okay, well now create this particular code and show how to do it with async, or generate it and show me how to do it with JSON RPC, because we support that as well, or with jQuery. So we will continue evolving this particular sample app that you get directly out of the code generator. Okay, George is asking if it is right to consider that this version of WebORB is an alternative to DWR in terms of AJAX and JSON support. Absolutely. WebORB included AJAX support back in, I believe, 2006. All right, it just all this time our focus was not really AJAX, even though we had support for this functionality for a long time. But in terms of the capabilities that it provides, it is definitely on par, and in some areas way better. Like for instance, all these code generation features, I believe, really put WebORB on a completely different level. So, plus, with all the messaging stuff that we are doing, I think it definitely has a solid place among many other AJAX frameworks. Okay. Cappuccino support. I'm not that familiar with Cappuccino, so I definitely would love to hear more. If you could put a link into the questions, I'll definitely look into that later. Okay. All right. So that was AJAX support. And as far as integration, there is this WebORB.js file, and you need to include that whenever you import it. And this code right here, databinding.js, is what was actually generated with all the types, all the complex types, with all the plumbing, specifically for this example. Now, here I was looking into just POJOs, but exactly the same functionality is applicable for EJBs, for Spring Beans, we're adding support for Hibernate, and that's also going to be in 4.1. Very, very cool support, but I didn't have a demo of this ready for today, so we're going to skip that. We're definitely going to be doing 4.1 once it actually hits production, and there will be a follow-on webinar with all the specifics of what actually made it into the release. All right, so let me quit this, the AJAX, and let me show you what we are doing with Silverlight. So because it's also kind of in the code generation category. So here's my Silverlight TARP code generator. And I'm also going to select the generate project files. Now, and let's just download this code. All right, so here's the zip file. And I'll need to rename this directory C#. Okay. Now, in the code generator, notice that there are two folders. There's Mono Develop and Visual Studio VS 2010. And so what we did is the code generator will create all the code both for Mono environment if you are on Mac or Linux, and for Visual Studio if you are on Windows. So here, since I'm already on the Mac, I'm going to use Mono Develop, and there's also a solution file. I double-click on that, and it's going to start Mono Develop. And if you're not familiar with Mono, I'm going to briefly say that it is a development environment. It is an open source development environment for Visual Studio type of development. So if you are developing with Microsoft.NET, and if you want to do it on Mac or Linux environment, then Mono Develop gives you a really, really powerful set of tools to develop those types of applications directly in the same operating system that you may have your backend running on. So here, this is the solution file created by WebORB. I'm going to compile it real quick. And it includes a Silverlight application that is directly out of the code generator, allows you to integrate Silverlight or Windows Phone 7 app with Java backend. All right. Now, one of the things that I need to do is I need to change how it is deployed, because I cannot just run it from the file system. It needs to be loaded from the server. So here, data binding is going to be my folder. Okay, let me rerun it. And I'm just going to run this item. And that's just going to run my Silverlight application. All right, so here's my Silverlight app. Now notice that it has file : / and Silverlight sandbox will not let me do client-server communication between cross two different schemas, because internally it's going to be doing HTTP call into WebORB, but it was loaded using file : //. So I need to change it to be loaded from my web server. All right, so here it is, very similar to the AJAX, but now it is Silverlight, as you can see right here. I can select a method and click invoke, and and get an exception. Okay, something didn't get deployed right there. Okay, I guess was not a good example to pick, but the idea is that you should be able to invoke those methods, and in the final release you will be able to do that. But very similarly, there is a code generated right there that you can copy and paste into your application. Let me actually pick something that I'm pretty sure will just work. In fact, let me go to this basic service. Okay, Mono Develop, my basic service. Rebuild. I'm going to say its directory is basic. And let's run it. Okay, so let's enter the arguments. Click invoke, and here it is. We got the result. Now, very similarly, there is a code generated now in C# that you can copy and paste into your application as well.